and first and foremost, just to extend my pleasure at welcoming all to this inaugural lecture. The Ralph Gross Chair in Business and the Liberal Arts has been established through a generous gift of the Gross estate. Ralph Gross graduated from St. John's University in 1965 with a bachelor's degree in economics. He went on to pursue advanced studies in business and accounting at the University of Minnesota and later became a certified public accountant. Ralph began his career at Arthur Andersen Accounting and continued as comptroller at SPS Companies, a plumbing supply business in the Twin Cities. Ralph later became part owner of SPS and in 1999, president and CEO. Friends and family members describe Ralph as a gentleman, a trusted friend, and a man committed to his parents and to all of his siblings. He was known to his employees as an ethical businessman and a quiet but effective leader. We at St. John's and St. Ben's are so very grateful for this very generous gift. Now it is my privilege to introduce my colleague and friend, Dr. Joseph DesJardins, who has been named the Ralph Gross Chair in Business and the Liberal Arts. Joe is a familiar face on campus. He first taught philosophy at Villanova University for several years, but then he joined the CSB-SJU philosophy department in 1990. He became academic dean and associate provost in 2006 and served as vice provost from 2011 to 2014. Among his many publications, and I stress many, are Business Ethics, Decision-Making for Personal Integrity and Social Responsibility, Business Ethics and the Environment, Imagining a Sustainable Future, and an Introduction to Business Ethics. His writings have been translated into Japanese, French, and Chinese. Since 2012, Joe has been on the advisory board and has served as faculty for the Environmental Diplomatic Leadership Program at Tsukuba University in Japan. Joe served as the executive director of the Society for Business Ethics from 2004 to 2008, before his appointment to the board in 2011. And currently, Joe serves as president for this very important organization. He has served the Association to Advance Collegiate Schools of Business as workshop facilitator since 2007, and he was co-founder and co-editor of the Journal of Peace and Justice Studies. This inaugural lecture celebrates the life and legacy of Ralph Gross, and we also celebrate Joe DesJardins' leadership and influence in the fields of business and the liberal arts. Tonight's presentation asks the question, is it time to jump off the sustainability bandwagon? Please join me in welcoming Joe to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you. I am very honored by this appointment, and also, after 35 years in the classroom, nervous, looking out at all my friends. You know, it's not supposed to happen, but I'll get over it. As I say, I'm really honored by the position, but really humbled. We heard at dinner tonight a little bit of Ralph's story, life story, and in many ways it resembles mine, or mine resembles his. First generation college. We apparently had the same mother, because when my mother passed away, I found that same box of yellowed clippings from the newspapers of every time I made the dean's list, every time I graduated high school. Linda still has them. So we apparently had the same mother. My parents, like Ralph's, didn't graduate from college. They never went to college. They never graduated high school. So this little kid from Norwich, Connecticut, here has come a long way. So I am humbled, and I'll take a deep breath and see what we can do tonight. We thought it would be helpful talking with Mike and Rita a little bit. For me to begin by talking about the chair itself, and maybe the vision sounds like a pretty fancy word, but the ideas that I would have for the next couple years while I'm in this position, and talk a little bit about my area, my field as an introduction to the talk itself. The position is, for students here especially, endowed chairs are pretty special thing. They really are positions late in your career when you can say, wow, I made it. I'm very proud of it. But for most schools, especially research universities, big universities, an endowed position is a way to get out of the classroom. Because if you got an endowed position, you then go off as a lone wolf, do your own little research, and be happy that you don't have to work with students anymore. That's sort of the epitome of one version of higher education. That's not how we do things here at St. John's and St. Ben's. For me, this endowed position, this chair, is going to give me the opportunity to work with so many people in this room. The position is business and the liberal arts. And on first glance, it's doing what we already do very well. Our business curriculum is not the standard business curriculum that we would get at a business college. Carlson School, St. Thomas, God bless them. They do things differently because if you are majoring in business, essentially all the classes you take are in the business college. That doesn't happen here. Business is just one major amongst others. Global business, accounting, finance. It's a major, and you're still taking the same liberal arts curriculum. Part of my role as the Ralph Gross Chair will be to be a spokesperson, if you will, a voice for the liberal arts with my business colleagues, with the business curriculum, to make sure that the liberal arts, the humanities, especially in my field, don't get overlooked, missed. Whatever perspectives I can bring as a philosopher, I'll try to do. But just as importantly, I see my role as bringing a perspective from business into our philosophy courses, believe it or not, or into environmental studies, or into nutrition. Because I think that's the kind of education we're after here. The world doesn't come cut up into silos like that. Students aren't business students, philosophy students. They're students. And here they're liberal arts students. And they need to know business as well as they need to know philosophy. So what I hope to do over the coming years is work closely with people who are already doing those things very well. Dan Finn, the Clemens Chair in Economics and Theology. Exactly the kind of thing we're doing. The McCarthy Center, Matt's here someplace. A great, important project that we're doing. Matt has an endowed position, the Ed Henry Chair. Okay. Well, Matt, I'm going to be at your door saying, hey, let's talk about business, finance, accounting as part of public policy. Derek was here. There's Derek, hiding behind the post. One of the areas that I work in, and I'll start making the transition to the paper, is sustainability. My own background, my work has been in business ethics and environmental ethics. It was a natural to bring those two together and start looking at issues in sustainability. We've got a terrific environmental studies program. It's cross-disciplinary. It's not environmental science, it's environmental studies, where students take courses not just in biology and chemistry, but policy and economics and political science and ethics. And what I like to do is add GBiz, the global business major, to that mix. Our students in global business, if I could wave a magic wand, every student who graduates with a major in global business or accounting would minor in environmental studies or languages or philosophy. So my vision, pretentious word, for what I hope to do in the coming years is to be that voice for the liberal arts in the business curriculum, but to also be the voice for business with the rest of all of my friends here. So let me begin the transition, and I told you I was nervous. That will go before the night. What the heck does a philosopher have to offer to any of this? My background's in philosophy. A proud graduate of Southern Connecticut State University. Family members teach there. What's philosophy going to contribute to conversations on public policy or business or accounting or any important thing? So I'm going to talk a little bit, just briefly, about philosophy. Everybody's really excited now. Oh, God. Steve is. Thanks, Steve. But I want to say a little bit about my perspective, where I'm going, and lay the groundwork for what I'll say for the rest of the night. This is me. No, don't quote me on any of this. But I think there are two environmental images of philosophy, or philosophers out there. One is the sage who sits up on the mountaintop. And because he or she's up on the mountaintop, has great vision, can see perspectives that nobody else can, and has that great theory. That's the philosophy of Plato and Aristotle and Aquinas, and even Descartes. But there's another image of philosophy that's also environmental. Steve Wagner here is a Descartes specialist. That's environmental in a different sense, and it actually comes from John Locke. Philosopher John Locke said, philosophers are the under-laborers. They clear out the mess. And I'll give you a quote from Locke in a minute, but I think that's a tradition that goes back to Socrates. My own training was in 20th century British philosophy, analytic philosophy, linguistic philosophy. The view of philosophy is much more humble. We don't have the answers. We're not the ones who can give you the theory of the meaning of life. Sorry, I don't have it. But philosophers can contribute by getting rid of the rubbish. That's John Locke's quote. I won't read it for you. But the image, Locke, right, writing at the start of the real scientific revolution, talking about people like Isaac Newton, said, those are the bright people, the scientists. If you want knowledge, go to science. What's left for philosophy? We're the underlaborers. We'll clear out the rubbish. We'll get rid of the junk. And let the real knowledge come from science. We'll help clean up things a little bit. In my analytic tradition, some philosophers would just say, we do ordinary language. We try to clear up confusions by paying attention to what we say and what we mean. Not very exciting, I'm sorry to say, but that's what I'm going to do tonight. Turning to the issue of sustainability. Classic definition comes from 1987, the 80s. UN began a commission looking at the real problems humans are facing in the late 20th century. I won't rehearse them all, but significant poverty, malnutrition, hunger, right? Literally hundreds of millions of people in the world suffer every day for the lack of basic necessities. Every single day. When they wrote this in 1987, the world population was 5 million people. Today it's 7.2 billion, 7.2 and counting. Almost a 40% increase in 20 years. 5. Right? So imagine the depth of real needs out there in the world. Imagine it's getting worse. So we need a very vigorous economy to address those real needs of billions of people. On last night, NBC News, Ann Thompson reported the agreement that President Obama and President Xi Jinping, the only president of a country with 2 billion people, and I don't know his name, sign an agreement to address global warming, right? Over the last decade, China has been averaging 1 coal-fired power plant a week bringing online. They're decreasing that now once every 10 days, so about 350 a year. The economy that we need to address real needs seems to be at the same time destroying the resources that we need to meet those needs. That's the issue of sustainability. Can we develop a model of economic development that addresses real needs of all of us and our children and grandchildren without destroying the earth in the process? So we've got the definition by the Brundtland Commission, but I use this as well because this didn't come out of the blue. Right? Group of people working for years developing an account of what sustainable development would be, compromised, thought about it. Words matter. And part of what I'm going to be talking about in the coming hours is that words do matter. And that maybe, got your attention though, didn't I? As the hook to get you here tonight, maybe it's time that we back off sustainability. Maybe it's time we jump off the bandwagon. Maybe. We'll see. We catch up. Okay, so there's a definition, there's an account of sustainable development. What's the ethics of this account? Where does ethics comes in? Importantly, this is very clearly an ethical definition, right? It's an account of economic development that is rooted in the ethics of distributive justice, what philosophers would call economic justice or distributive justice. What do we owe other people? And it has the added hook of bringing in future generations. Not only what do we owe ourselves, intergenerational, intra, but what do we owe future generations? It is also, at least implicitly, an ethics, an environmental ethics. Right? It views the natural ecosystem as a resource to be used for human needs. So it is in the language of environmental ethicists. It's a conservationist theory. Resources should be conserved for our children and grandchildren. And it is anthropocentric. Fancy word for saying it's about us and not nature itself. Now, I lay this out at the start because, first, to show that there's a deep philosophical pedigree to this view. People have thought long and hard, smart people have thought long and hard about these issues. But it's also very controversial. It's not the only theory of economic justice. It's not the only theory of environmental ethics. And I'm going to come back to that a little bit. But there's the background. That's sustainability sort of mainstream. Now, since 1987, sustainability's all over the place. You can't walk down the street without tripping over sustainable something. I call it sustainable A to Z. As I started playing with this, I started thinking, well, all right, what does it modify? Agriculture, architecture, business. You go through the alphabet, and yes, you can find every letter represented, and yes, I did it. Google, sustainable A, and you get a list. B, you get a list. And it didn't get hard until I got to X, Y, and Z. Anybody guess what sustainable X was? It's kind of cheats. No, I thought that's my big Christmas trees. All right, cheating, maybe. Y, my favorite, was sustainable yachts. It's not bad. Sustainable zoos. But you get the point. It's all over the place. Sustainability is the latest, greatest fad. In business, it's equally all over the place. Ernst & Young reports that of the global 350, the 350 largest global corporations, 95% of them issue an annual sustainability report. Every corporation is doing it. Many businesses are using triple bottom line accounting, claiming that that's part of, don't get me started on that, that's part of sustainability as well. Every area within the business community is sustainable. Marketing, engineering, finance, investing, operations. King Shook is here. Right? Everything's sustainable. There are niche businesses in sustainability. You know, we should have a sustainable management major. Why? Because there are a lot of jobs out there. We won't grow the curriculum, but we might offer some courses. Right? There are jobs in sustainability consulting. Every major accounting firm in the world has a sustainability section. Ernst & Young, KPMG, Accenture, everybody's doing it. Nonprofits all over the place. Sierra Club has their sustainability consulting. There are businesses in sustainability measuring. How do you know if you're being sustainable? Well, we'll come in and tell you whether you are or not. Sustainable investing, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Sustainable ranking. Forbes every year publishes the Forbes list of 100 most sustainable companies, many of which, by the way, are oil companies, which suggests that something has gone wrong someplace. Okay. So it's all over the place. Everybody's doing it. And yes, I'm suggesting, following John Locke, there's a lot of garbage out there. There's a lot of rubbish. And here's where I'm going. We're doing okay for time. What I want to do is walk through what I see to be the major challenges to sustainability. And I call them internal and external. External challenges in the sense that they are not part of what sustainability is after, but they're pulling it in directions elsewhere. There are some challenges that I call, they're really asking sustainability to do too little. Right? Pulling it in this direction. And then some challenges that I want to talk about where sustainability is asked to do too much. Too much in the sense, and this is just some jargon, CSR in my field means corporate social responsibility. And as I'll talk about in a little bit, for a lot of people, sustainability has become a substitute for corporate social responsibility. It's a basket in which everything gets thrown in, and it just means everything ethical or social. But also, maybe more controversially, I think it's being pulled in the wrong way by a lot of environmentalists who are asking sustainability to carry to carry weight that it just can't handle. So, being asked to do too little, it turns out to be really just risk management, not just, but risk management. Asked to do too much, everything under the sun is incorporated. I think once you get rid of that stuff, there are still some deep problems remaining to be answered by sustainability, what I call the internal challenges. That the theory of justice is a theory of justice based on needs, good philosophical pedigree, but problematic. That there are internal consistency problems with sustainability. Right? The big thing with sustainability is that the three pillars. It addressed economic, ecological or environmental and ethical issues, always assuming that they go together. They don't. And then finally, and just very briefly I'll touch on, what I think of as problems of what I would call system and individual. What did I call it there? System component. Sustainability began as an economic development model, global in scope. And now we're talking about sustainable yachts. There's a problem that I'll talk about. Okay. Let me then push on into the heart of what's happening. And here I will read a little bit. when you look at how sustainability is used, particularly in business practice, it's not even reading between the lines. It's pretty clear that the word means something similar to risk management. And after having spent the last year and a half with Dick Adamson of my other career on risk management here at St. John's, I've come to learn a few things. That it's not necessarily ethical. Okay. But let me start by just doing a little bit of philosopher word game. A distinction between what I want to call descriptive and normative meanings. That the word sustainable is used by the Brundtland Commission, is a normative word. It's an ethical word. It carries a lot of value weight. To describe something as sustainable in this sense is to say it's a good thing. It's to praise it, right? Because why? Because it's addressing real needs of future generations, present generations. So sustainable by the Brundtland Commission has a normative meaning, a value-laden meaning. But that need not be so, right? Sustainable is a perfectly legitimate word that also has a descriptive meaning. It just means being able to continue. So you can think of a lot of bad things that it would be sustainable. Is subprime mortgage lending sustainable? Well, I don't know. You can imagine Lehman Brothers people asking that question. You could imagine, God bless them, Tom Petty saying, is this Ponzi scheme sustainable? Right? It's a perfectly meaningful sentence because sustainability also means just to be able to carry on. Okay, I think that distinction between normative and descriptive lies at the heart of why so many people are on the sustainability bandwagon. Because what they hear is, I can continue to do what I'm doing. I want to be sustainable. And I want to suggest that ain't so. So let me just read for you a couple of quotes for how it's been used. This is from the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, by far the biggest investment, sustainability investment activity measure. Here's their definition to clients. They're trying to sell their service to clients. This is how they define sustainability. Sustainability is a business approach that creates long-term shareholder value by embracing opportunities and managing risks derived from economic, environmental, and social problems. Corporate sustainability is based on two guiding principles. Sustainable business practices are critical to the creation of long-term shareholder value, and sustainability factors represent opportunities and risks that competitive companies must address. They go on. Here's Ernst & Young, their sustainability consulting firm. Here's how they describe what they do with sustainability. Sustainability consulting, our service to you, will address 4 goals: improved reputation, access to capital, increased efficiencies, and avoiding or mitigating environmental risks. Okay, those are just 2 examples. They're all over the place. They can be multiplied dozens and dozens of times. You might ask, so what? I can see it in your eyes. So what? So it's risk management. Well, 2 things. First, it puts the ethical basis of sustainability in self-interest. Do it because it's in your self-interest. And second, it has to rest on the assumption that there is a connection between economic profitability or survival and doing the environmentally and socially just thing. Right? 2 things. It assumes self-interest, and it assumes a connection between doing the right thing ethically or environmentally and business success. Okay, two things. First, to say that it's based on self-interest is not to say that it's unethical. But a case needs to be made. And, you know, my dear favorite, Plato, early books of the Republic, asked that question. Is it better to be just and have a reputation being so-so, or is it better to be unjust but have a reputation for justice? And dear old Thrasymachus says, that's a no-brainer. I want everybody in the world to think I'm a good, just guy so I can cheat them a little better. Right? If you tie business sustainable activities to self-interest, you're going to be on a tenuous grounding. Right? Especially for areas, firms, products, industries that won't fit the Brundtland definition. Remember that? Meeting the needs of the present and the future without jeopardizing the future? Well, can every product be sustainable? Is every firm sustainable? That is does every product meet the needs? Is every firm, every industry? Coal-fired power plants? Is that going to meet the needs of the present? Future? Without jeopardizing? Right? So if you tie sustainability to self-interest, and leave it at, it's going to be tenuous. The second connection, and here I'll call to colleagues and students, it's an empirical question whether or not doing the sustainable thing is in the environmental interest. That connection that this view has to assume. So there's some good research projects. Go out and test it. Colleagues in GBiz or finance, students want to do research projects. Go out and look at how do firms perform when they address environmental issues. And I think the answer is, you're going to find, it depends. It depends on a lot of things. Okay. So I believe that this risk management strategy is really wrong-headed because it's not asking business to address environmental issues and social justice issues. It's asking business to do what business always does. Look for ways to survive. And if that's so, then that original definition is meaningless because it says the status quo is sustainable. Okay, that's the one longer one. To be honest, that's the area that I've done most thinking and writing about, so I've got more on it, but we won't go any further. The second is generic corporate social responsibility. Again, let me read just... Is that me? When I've been in this room for the last 8 years, I've never used a microphone. I've shouted. I could do it. Find my notes. Probably the largest sustainability measurement operation in the world is called the Global Reporting Index, GRI. It's used internationally, probably less in the US, but widely used in international corporate settings. It's a way for corporations to determine if they are doing the sustainable thing. How do they measure according to the GRI? And the GRI has developed this very sophisticated metrics. Here's some of the things that they say. We provide metrics and methods for measuring and reporting sustainability-related performance. They adopt common practice of dividing sustainability into economic, environmental, and ethical domains. Their economic consists of metrics that measure the organization's impact on economic conditions of its stakeholders and on the economic systems at local, national, and global levels. Okay, pretty generic. The environmental dimension concerns the organization's impact on living and non-living natural systems, including land, air, water, ecosystems. Okay, again, fairly reasonable. What's the ethical domain? According to the GRI, the ethical domain of sustainability includes, among other things, the United Nations Universal Declarations on Human Rights. Did you know you have a right to rest and leisure? In case you didn't know. You also have a right to enjoy the arts. The UN Declaration. The International Covenant, another UN document on civil and political rights. The International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. The International Labor Organization's declarations on workplace rights. The GRI framework also includes responsibilities to local community engagement, initiatives to counter corruption, anti-competitive behavior, commitments to product safety, ethical marketing, and ethical sourcing. In short, the ethical dimension is what we generally do in a business ethics course. Everything. And I want to suggest it has almost nothing to do with sustainability. The Global 100 ranking, the other one, the one that determines the Forbes list of the 100 most sustainable corporations, incorporates many obvious environmental measures, metrics for energy, carbon use, water, waste production. But among the ethical ones, the Global 100 includes ratio of CEO to average worker salary, percentages of your tax paid, figure that out, stability of your pension funds, workplace safety, employee turnover, and the diversity of your leadership team. These are all very good things. Right? The world would be a better place if businesses did those things. But they have nothing to do with sustainability. How so? Imagine a world in which, pick your favorite. My favorite is Thomas Hobbes. A world in which people's needs were met. I'm reading a history of British Revolution right now, and last night I read a chapter on Hobbes. Writing at the time when Cromwell just beheaded Charles I, all hell's breaking loose in England. And Hobbes writes, the most important thing we need is safety. And the only way to guarantee that is the Leviathan, bring back the king or Cromwell. But forget about all the fluff. That is, we can imagine a world easily that meets the definition of the Brundtland Commission, in which human needs are met, short-term and long-term, and in which the natural environment continues to provide for those needs, but in which people are enslaved, in which people are repressed, in which all kinds of bad things go on. CEOs get paid too much. Products aren't, whatever. Right? Let me shift not just from the general ethical issue, but from the environmental stance. Because for many people, not only should a sustainable business do all of those other things, it also should do every conceivable good environmental thing. Protect the wilderness. Preserve species. Right? Protect ecosystems. You remember at the beginning, I described the environmental ethics of sustainability as a conservationist ethics. That is, the natural world should be conserved so that we can use it. Well, that's a very controversial thing amongst many environmentalists. People who think that, for example, animals have rights, or natural ecosystems deserve respect. Right? Nature isn't something to be used, it's something to be respected and preserved, not conserved. I also described it as anthropocentric. right? Human-centered. Well, there are a lot of environmentalists who say that's not environmental ethics. So it seems like they try to get it in anyway. Now, I don't know if I mentioned, I can tell I'm nervous. I read a version of this paper 2 weeks ago at a business ethics conference in Dublin. And when I finished this part, a good friend was in the audience. She's from South Africa. She said, "Joe, but these are all good things. And the GRI, I know you Americans don't care about it, but the GRI is so important in the EU. We need it. What are you doing criticizing it? Corporations globally are buying into this, and they're doing good things. Why? Don't you just leave it alone?" And my answer, essentially two, Molly, her name was Molly. First, it's a matter of integrity. Right? Why are you calling it sustainability? Call it for what it is. But also, what are you going to do when they find out? What are you going to do when somebody scratches their head and say, well, wait a minute, I thought, as an example maybe I'll talk about in a little bit, that GMO foods were unsustainable. You've been kidding me on this. Or I thought I had to preserve endangered species because that was necessary for sustainability, and I'm committed to sustainability. You mean it's not? Again, I think many people, defenders of sustainability, are throwing everything but the kitchen sink into the concept. And anything that means anything to everybody means nothing. Okay, I'm going to run through just the last part pretty quickly, because I think this is where the work really rests. This is the work that we should be doing. That is, if we can separate out all the rubbish, get rid of the stuff that we don't need, that doesn't belong there, and look at the original concept, there's something deeply right about the Brundtland Commission. The way we human beings have practiced economic development in the 20th century has been wrong-headed. We've been destroying the earth, the productive capacity of the earth, and we're not meeting the needs of real human beings. There's something deeply right about that. So, the work that remains. The first issue, needs-based theories of justice. It sounds great. We should meet people's needs. But, what are they? Theory of needs, again, the great classical philosophers, Plato liked talking about them. Aquinas certainly would talk about them. The Catholic bishops in a recent document on vocation as business as a vocation talks about, if you want to turn a job into a vocation, focus on not the economic phrase goods and services, but what they said, I don't know if it was the bishops, but Michael Norton and a bunch of people. Not goods and services generically, the way economists talk about it, but good goods. Goods that are really good. And services that really serve. Philosophers probably have not, by and large, bought that view for about 600 years. Give or take a century. It's a very difficult theory to defend because you need an account of the human good that underlies this account of needs. What do you need? And again, it's easy to say, well, you need food. What kind of food? Nutritious food. Okay. What's nutritious food? Golden rice. Golden rice is a genetically modified rice that, watch this, no science at all, but I'll make it up, that has a gene taken from plants that basically do photosynthesis better than rice does. so that it produces vitamin A. A major cause of blindness worldwide is vitamin A deficiency. Rice, a very common food worldwide. You want to address a real human problem? Grow genetically modified rice, except in areas where environmental activists will dig it up and threaten to boycott. And it's hard to produce it. Now, where's the needs there? And I don't mean to tell that story to degrade or dismiss critics of it. There are real issues. What do humans need? And oh, by the way, we need lots of things. And they can come into conflict. We need food. How about freedom? What happens when needs like food conflict with needs like security or health care or freedom? A theory of justice based on needs runs into three problems. One, it needs an account of what's really good for people, good goods. And dear old Immanuel Kant said there are no goods in the world in and of themselves except the goodwill. It's hard to come up with that account. Second, even if you come up with that account, needs like food or nutrition can conflict with other deeply held values, not the least of which is individual freedom to choose. Suppose somebody doesn't want to eat nutritious food. Suppose somebody likes a 1,300 calorie double Whopper Burger King. Freedom. And then the third issue is, even if you could get an account of needs, a systematic, defensible one, how do you secure them? And in particular, what's the role of economic markets, competitive markets, in meeting those needs? Problem one. A needs-based theory of justice needs articulation and defense, needs a lot of work. It's not a slam dunk. Problem two, I've hinted at what I call internal consistency conflicts, challenges. The assumption that a sustainable economy or a sustainable firm or a sustainable industry can be both economically, environmentally, and ethically sustainable. As the GMO example suggests, there can easily be conflicts between what is ethically demanded, what is economically demanded to meet needs, and what's environmentally rational. I think there are lots of examples of that. I pick food as my favorite for lots of reasons. But I think food is really, nutritious food. Well, what does that mean to people who are literally starving to death? And it's easy for us to say it means grain-fed beef, organic chicken, all those cool things that we buy. But I don't want genetically modified foods. We need to meet the needs of billions, literally billions of people. Are we going to do it with pesticides, herbicides, industrial agriculture? Inconceivable that we could do it any other way. Right? So what's more important, meeting the needs of people or doing it in a way that it's environmentally benign? I don't want to suggest the trade-off is maybe that dramatic, but over time I think it is. I think short-term we need industrial agriculture if we're going to meet needs. And environmentally, that's a pretty ugly picture. Final point, and then I do want to offer the opportunity for questions, as I promised, but not to you. The system and component problem. The Brundtland Commission was thinking about the big picture. Worldwide, global economic development. That's what they thought needed to be sustainable. Today, every firm, every business, every organization, every profession claims we do sustainability. Wait. But consider the most nasty, environmentally nasty firm is long-term sustainable if the system around it is doing very well. Dump all your pollution in the river because you're the only one doing it. Right? Likewise, or similarly, the most sustainable, ideal firm isn't sustainable if the economy or the ecosystem in which it lives collapse. Right? I think the phrase sustainability only applies meaningfully to systems, not to lower level components. So I think we should stop talking about it at the lower level component. Okay, all right. Conclusions. Now I'll go back up on the mountaintop. So what, DesJardins? What's the answer? And you remember I told you I didn't have any.
Joe, first of all, what's he smoking up there?
You know, John, I wondered about that myself. Whatever it is, it's organically grown. And legal and stuff. Those are clouds. Those are clouds. Heads are in the clouds. But let me offer some, if not conclusions, what's next. Again, I think there's something deeply right about the Brundtland work. It's just right. Anyone who thinks that China can continue to build a coal-fired power plant, using dirty coal, by the way, high sulfur coal, one every 10 days. And oh, by the way, have we talked about India or Brazil or Indonesia? No. That is not sustainable. So I think what we need to do is dig out what is worth keeping. Another conclusion, I think, is that economic markets alone aren't sufficient. Too many externalities. See, I can talk the language if you... Mike's really happy. I think regulation is necessary. I think we'll always have the free rider problem because of the system and component issue. There's always going to be an incentive for the individual to cheat if the system's doing well, as we know all the time. Therefore, I think sustainability is an issue of public policy and regulation. So I want to work with Matt in the McCarthy Center. We should be talking about that all the time. Right? I think there's an important role for mandatory, obligatory legal solutions here. I think we have to understand and recognize that sustainability is a relatively narrow concept. And let's get back to the original reasons, arguments for all those other ethical issues, environmental and otherwise, that get pulled in. You know, business ethics. You've heard, we've got lots of textbooks. You know, we can talk, there are arguments to be made. Good arguments to be made for sustainability. I'm sorry, for ecological preservation that have nothing to do with sustainability. Species preservation, I think, is the big one. Biological diversity. The world is going to get along just fine without any number of species. Bengal tiger, pick your favorite endangered species. Going to get along just fine without it. Certainly, we're going to get along fine without it. We're going to meet the needs of people fine without it. But that doesn't mean it's not important. It just means the arguments for it have to be different than these. There is a reason why I want Bengal tigers in the world. Has nothing to do with sustainability. Probably has something more to do with my son, his sons, whenever they show up, and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So I call on my colleagues in theology, for example. Make the arguments for the spiritual value of things like ecological preservation, wilderness preservation, species preservation. It's just not this economic argument. And I think that Despite what I say about risk management, I think a strong business case can be made for sustainability. That there are good economic and financial reasons for doing good, sustainable things, and there are models out there that offer us a way forward. And I'm obviously not going to tell you what they are. I know many of you know people like Paul Hawkins writing and Amory Lovin's The Natural Capitalism Model. It's a great one. Businesses should be modeled on their phrase, biological systems, biomimicry, where the end product of a business operation or product becomes the food, as Bill McDonough said, waste is food. My favorite example, Mississippi topsoils here in Cold Spring. If you know that, Mississippi topsoil, Brad Matuska makes, sells compost. Where is his firm located? Right next door to Golden Plump Chicken Processing Plant. What does he use for compost? And by the way, right along the Sauk River, their waste is his natural resource or economic resource. There's a great model. Another model, business model, and just the last point, concentrate on service, not products. Again, there lots of folks talk about it. We don't need to own an air conditioner. What do you need to own? What do you want? You want cool air. Not this big piece of machinery. I don't need to own a car. I can rent it. You want services. Interface Carpeting Company is the sort of case study for that, where they take their carpeting back when you're done with it. Gives them an incentive to do a pretty good job manufacturing. Make sure it's not poison, so when their employees are bringing it back, recycling it, they're not dying. And make it in little squares. So I don't have to replace the whole room. I can do great efficiency. So I think there are models out there. The models are narrow. That's what I want to do when I work with GBiz, my colleagues in that program. Can we help students understand how to run good, environmentally sane firms that address real human needs? And it's not a lot of the other stuff. So with that, as promised, I'm done in an hour. Okay, I did it in 40 minutes in Dublin, but that's okay. What do you think? Questions or thoughts? And Derek, what do you think?
I'm absolutely on board with this, so I'm looking forward to the years of conversation. You brought up building kind of right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Immediately went on with other folks. Being less bad isn't good, it's just less bad.
Yeah.
The problem with the sustainability approach is that it allows you to take credit for marginally less bad.
Yeah.
Instead of shutting down industries and operations and systems that are just destructive.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we get past that?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you want? Let me get the shovel guy. I don't know how we get that, but I think that's exactly right. I think, again, at this Dublin conference, there was a panel discussion on good goods. And you know, all the philosophers in the room destroyed the people. 3 people up there trying to defend it. And not fully, but you know, basically. And at the end of it, one person, good friend Pat Werhane, said, well, maybe there aren't good goods, but there are bad bads. And so we incrementally, we can get away from the bads. And I think it's helpful, but it's not the answer. So I don't know. I don't have answers, right?
Joe, I've got a question you probably have an answer.
Oh, those are the questions I like.
Yeah. Well, with your teaching, I got some insights. Now I think the chair himself probably will have to lead us along in analysis and teaching. Right now, we are facing in the state of Louisiana a situation where the senator is not fully elected. The sitting senator is a Democrat, and her position made clear is that she wants to complete the Keystone XL pipeline as quickly and energetically as possible and put all those people to work. So she's introducing it in the Senate. Her lead competitor in a runoff election has introduced a similar bill in the House of Representatives to complete the Keystone XL pipeline as soon as possible, so as to get the industry, all people to jobs, and so with your insights to three ways of analyzing this, how do I vote?
If I had to describe my own environmental views, I would say that I am an environmental pragmatist in the great tradition of Dewey James and Dewey Cheatham and Howe. I think that, bottom line, better now is sometimes good enough. So what does that mean? I think you got to build it. I don't know enough details, but certainly my view says you got to make compromises. Do I like coal-fired plants? Nope. Do we want to close down Becker? Nope. Do I like nuclear? No. But I've got a geothermal system, so I'll be okay. But we can't do that. So what are we going to tell the Chinese? India, right? And part of the reaction to yesterday's agreement between the U.S. and China was the Indians raising their hand. Who the hell are you to tell us? It's easy for you to say, let's cut emissions, but we got a couple billion people to feed. I'm a big fan of fuel cells. I think fuel cells are the future. Plug power. If you want the Linda laughs because it's where my retirement has been for a decade. Yeah, I'm in a lot of trouble. But that doesn't mean we can do away without internal combustion engines for a generation or so. So I think we're going to continue to make compromises. I think we're going to muddle along. And I think something like the Brundtland definition gives us a direction, a vision that's fundamentally right in important ways. It's just not the solution to everything. That's, cop out. But again, I'm not the philosopher up on a mountaintop. Wash my hands of any responsibility. Other thoughts? Dan, uh-oh.
Let me ask about your position as the underlaborer.
Yes.
I appreciate a lot of the underlaboring you did tonight, but I thought you made some mountaintop commitments as well. That is to say, if you care about sustainability, by any definition, wouldn't you say it's not an underlaborer care?
Yeah.
Don't you have to have some sort of definition of what is good for us?
Yeah.
And therefore, don't you have to be, this is the theologian in me, have to have more than just the underlaborer philosopher's point of view to take on what you've taken on?
Yeah. In preparing this, I came across a phrase that I used myself in the paper version of this, where I say it's an issue of economic justice and common decency. And I thought, where did that phrase come from, DesJardins, this common decency sense? And I started thinking, again, as a philosopher, it is this kind of pragmatic muddling along. How do you get us, present generations, to give a damn about people who don't exist right now, future generations? Why should we care? I think there is no argument for why we should. Argument in the philosophical sense, I'll give you the premises and here's the conclusion. But, and here's where I've become a very different philosopher, I think we tell stories. I think we rely on something less than philosophical argumentation to appeal to meaning in life. So I become, I'm looking at Steve because within our department, I've become more of a Tony Cunningham than a DesJardins, Kantian, Rawlsian. I don't think there are principles. I think it's trying to get people to care. And I don't think you can convince them, argue them to do it. I think it's looser than that, and therefore it's going to fail. sadly, often enough to get people to care. So yes, there is an ethical basis, but it's not what philosophers would call foundational. It's good luck. Not a... uh-oh.
That sort of suggests that an argument is more effective in changing someone's point of view than a deeply rich account of human life.
Yeah.
And I think it's the other way around.
Yeah. And I think, for those of you, this is an internal squabble amongst philosophers, but certainly a decade ago or 2 decades ago, I was kind of a Kantian rationalist. I thought we could make arguments, and I thought that reasons gave people motivation to act. I don't think that anymore. So, but that makes the world messier. It means that, and again, and I don't want to, but that's what we're doing here, right, at a liberal arts college. We're complicating the students' lives. We don't want them to see simple answers. We want them to take poetry and art classes, and science classes, and philosophy, and see the world in the big mess that it is. And hopefully we've built some character, some intelligence, some wisdom in that, and they, muddle along. Let me, in the back.
So we know there's several harms associated with big agriculture, industrial agriculture, but it's also necessary to feed the 7.2 billion that are here on Earth. How do you balance the harms of industrial agriculture to future generations with the current need to feed populations?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the answer is there's no easy answer. That you do it multiple. You rely on the goodwill of some people like farmers, and yes, believe it or not, maybe the goodwill of corporations like Cargill or Monsanto. But you also regulate them because you know what did Ronald Reagan say? Trust but verify. So you regulate the heck out of it, and it's a multi approach. You do science. There can be good and bad chemicals, right? Not all pesticides need be, or not all genetically modified foods. There's all kinds of genetically modified organisms. They're not all bad. So again, it's a not satisfactory answer in that I can't give you, here's what you do. It's a messy response with a vision that's leading you in a direction. Does that, I don't know if it counts as an answer, that's the best I got. But when I finish with the chair, I'll have answers.
Joe, one of the questions I have relates to corporations that are obviously involved in some potentially unethical matters, but they set up a charitable philanthropic arm to counter that. And so how do you balance taking money from a corporation that may be doing something that's incredibly unethical, but they set up, they're dumping the toxins into the same this river, but they're like, okay, now we're going to give the environmental classes to balance it out.
Yeah. I won't say take the money and run. Yeah. Yeah. Catherine, I don't think the world's that black and white. I think there are some corporations that have done terribly atrocious things. And the people who did them should be, pick your favorite. But even within those, there are, hundreds or thousands of good human beings. So it's partly the incentive process, it's partly the regulatory process, but I don't think you can say that corporation's bad. I just don't. I don't think you can. So maybe I'm just, boy, that young hippie radical has changed, hasn't he? And then ultimately, right, I mean, the philosopher would say, who do you want to be? Right, who do you want to be? Do you engage with evil, apartheid, whatever, and do the best, or do you and in some deep sense, that's an individual or an institutional thing. Who do we want to be? Do we want to take money from such corporations? Shall we call it? Again, thank you so much.